I need to tell you something before I lose the nerve, and I need you to listen all the way through, because if I stop in the middle, you will not understand why I am whispering this into a recorder at 3 a.m. with the lights off and a chair pushed against my door. 4 years ago, I worked search and rescue in a national park I am not allowed to name. On my first day, my supervisor handed me a small black notebook with a rubber band around it. Inside were rules. Most of them were ordinary. One of them was not. One of them was written in different handwriting, pressed harder into the paper, like whoever wrote it was angry or afraid or both. Do not count the people you find. I laughed when I read it. I thought it was a hazing joke, the kind of thing seasoned rangers tell new hires to see who flinches. Nobody laughed back. My supervisor told me that if I broke the rule, I would know, and that when I knew, I should come to him before I told anyone else. I broke the rule twice that summer. The first time something followed me home. The second time I brought something out of the backcountry and handed it to a family in a parking lot, and they hugged it and they cried into its shoulder and they drove away with it, and I have not slept a full night since. I am going to tell you exactly what happened. I'm going to tell you what the rule meant and what the park was and why I will never set foot in a wilderness again as long as I live. And I am going to tell you what is in the hall outside my apartment right now, because I think it is listening, and I think if I say it out loud, it might finally go away, or it might come in. Either way, you deserve to know, because if you ever take a job like the one I took, the rule is going to be handed to you too. And I want you to believe it the first time. I took the job because my sister told me to. She was a paramedic in Sacramento, and she said I was getting strange in my apartment, that I had started talking to the television, that I needed to be outside. She wasn't wrong. I had been laid off 8 months earlier, and I had used the severance to do nothing in particular, and nothing in particular had begun to do something to me. So when the posting came up for a seasonal search and rescue position, I applied the same day. They hired me within a week. Later, I would understand why the turnaround was so fast. They were always hiring. The turnover was the job. My supervisor was a man named Ellis Brunn. He was maybe 55, with a face that had been left out in weather for a long time and had stopped trying to be handsome about it. He had one of those voices that sounded like it was coming from the next room, even when he was sitting across from you. The morning I started, he handed me the notebook and watched me open it the way I described before. And he told me to read every rule carefully and to follow the ones that didn't make sense even more carefully than the ones that did. I flipped through the pages while he watched. Most of the entries were practical. Always carry 2 liters more water than you think you need. Never radio a coordinate without repeating it twice. If a visitor tells you they saw something that frightened them, write down their exact words, not a summary. If you find a vehicle in the backcountry with the doors open, do not approach until you've called it in. Standard stuff, the kind of bureaucratic wisdom that accumulates in any dangerous profession. Then about 2/3 of the way through, in the tight, angry handwriting, there was the rule that stopped me. Do not count the people you find. I looked up at Ellis. I asked what it meant. He said it means what it says. If you bring people out, don't count them. Not in the van, not on the trail, not on the radio. Describe them individually if you have to, names, clothing, injuries, but don't count them. He stood up. He said he would see me at the briefing. That was the end of my onboarding. The team was small, 6 of us that summer. A woman named Sarah, who had been there 4 seasons and who, I would learn, was the most careful person I had ever met in my life. 2 brothers, Cal and Denny from Colorado, who treated the job like a long camping trip and drank together every night in a way that told you they were not exactly brothers by blood. A quiet man named Tomas, who spoke almost no English, whose tracking ability was so uncanny that rangers called him in from another region whenever a child went missing, and an older woman named Pat, who had been doing search and rescue in one park or another for almost 30 years, and who had a limp she would not talk about. At the end of my first briefing, Sarah caught my arm and asked if I had gotten the notebook. I said yes. She asked if I had read it. I said yes. She asked me to repeat the rule about counting. I repeated it. She nodded once and said, "Good, don't forget it, not even on easy days." Then she walked away, and I stood there in the trailer, and I felt for the first time the specific cold that I would come to associate with that summer, which is the cold of realizing that everyone around you believes in something you don't yet believe in, and that they are not crazy. For the first few weeks, the job was what I had expected. We worked in pairs mostly. We responded to twisted ankles and heat exhaustion and lost hikers who had taken the wrong fork at a trail junction and walked for 3 hours in the wrong direction before admitting it. We pulled a college kid out of a scree field with a broken femur and carried him 2 miles on a litter while he apologized the entire way. It was hard work and it was honest work, and I liked it more than I had liked anything in a long time. The air in that park had a quality I don't know how to describe without sounding sentimental. It smelled like it had been filtered through something very old. The rule about counting came up exactly once in those first weeks. We had brought out a church youth group that had gotten separated from their leader near a lake. 12 teenagers, all pretty fine, just scared and dehydrated. When we got them back to the trailhead, the leader, a man in his 40s with a cross around his neck, started to count them as they climbed into the van. Sarah said his name sharply. She knew him somehow, and said, "Don't. I'll do it by roster." He stopped with his hand out mid-count and looked at her, and I saw something pass between them that I did not understand. Then he put his hand down and nodded and got into the van. Sarah checked each kid off on a printed roster by name, one by one, and she did not say any number out loud, not once, not even when she was done. On the drive back, I asked her why. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Because some of the people we bring out were not lost the way we were told they were lost. And if you count them, you sometimes get a number that doesn't match the roster, and when the number doesn't match the roster, one of the extras follows you home." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was the laugh you do when someone you respect says something that sounds like a ghost story at a summer camp. She didn't take offense. She kept her eyes on the road and she said, "I laughed too my first season. Ellis didn't fire me for it. He just said to remember the laugh because I wouldn't have it for long." I tried to ask her more. She wouldn't answer. She said the rule was the rule. And the reason for the rule was a thing you had to come to on your own, and that trying to explain it in advance only made it harder when it happened. She said, "If it happens to you, come to me before you go to Ellis. Ellis is good, but he's tired. I'm still scared. Scared is more useful than tired." I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say. I remember thinking I would not need her help. The first time I broke the rule was in the middle of July. A family had reported their adult son missing after a day hike. He had gone out alone on a popular loop, a 6-mile thing with a lot of switchbacks and some exposed rock, and he had not come back by dark. The family was at the lodge. The mother was the kind of calm that is worse than panic, and the father kept apologizing for bothering us, which I have learned is a thing men of a certain age do when they are terrified. Cal and Denny and I went out at first light. We worked the loop in sections, calling his name, checking the obvious places people fall. Around noon, we found him. He was off trail, maybe 80 yards down a slope, sitting upright against a tree with a bad ankle and a worse sunburn and a bottle of water he had been rationing all night. He was lucid. He was embarrassed. He asked if his mother knew he was okay, and Denny radioed in that we had him and were bringing him out. Here's where it gets difficult to describe. We were helping him up the slope. Cal had one arm under his shoulder and I had the other. Denny was above us, breaking a path through the brush, and I looked up, and for just a second, I saw 4 of us on the slope. Cal, the son, me, and someone else. Someone walking just behind Denny, a little higher up, keeping pace. A man in a gray jacket. I saw him clearly. He had a beard. He was looking down at the son we were carrying, not at me, and his expression was one of gentle interest, the way you might look at a dog you used to own. I blinked, and he was gone. There were 3 of us on the slope, and one of us being carried. Denny was alone above us, breaking brush. I didn't say anything. I told myself I was tired. I told myself the sun was in my eyes. I told myself a lot of things between that moment and the trailhead. But when we got to the van and loaded the son in and his parents came running across the parking lot, I did something without thinking, the way you scratch an itch. I counted. In my head, the son, Cal, Denny, me. 4. The number was fine. The number matched. I felt a small relief I had not known I was carrying. And then, as his mother was hugging him and crying, I looked past her at the van and I saw, in the back seat, a man in a gray jacket, sitting very still, looking out the window at the trees. He had a beard. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the trees the way the son had looked at his water bottle the night before, like he was rationing something. I made a sound. I don't know what kind of sound. Cal turned to me and asked if I was all right, and I said yes. And I walked around the van and opened the back door, and the seat was empty. There was nothing there. There was a smell, faintly, something like wet wool and a cold fireplace. But the seat was empty, and the van was empty, and the mother was still crying into her son's shoulder. And nobody had seen anything but me. I didn't tell Cal. I didn't tell Denny. I drove home that night, and I sat in my cabin, and I poured a glass of something I don't drink anymore, and I tried to make the man in the gray jacket into a trick of the light. I failed. I'd seen him twice. I'd seen him clearly. And I had, against every instruction I had been given, counted. I went to Sarah the next morning before the briefing. She was already at the trailer, making coffee, and she took one look at my face and said, "Oh no," very quietly, the way you would speak to someone who had just gotten bad news from a doctor. She poured me coffee, and she sat me down, and she said, "Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. Don't make it make sense." I told her. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Did you see him at your cabin last night?" I said, "No." She said, "You will, not tonight maybe, but soon. He'll be outside first, then he'll be at the window, then he'll be inside. It's not fast. You have time. But you have to do the thing I'm going to tell you to do, and you have to do it exactly." She told me. I won't write down what she said. I have thought about writing it down many times because I think maybe it would help someone. But I also think that writing it down is a kind of counting, and I am done with counting. What I will say is that it involved going back to the place where I had first seen him, and it involved leaving something of mine there. And it involved not looking back on the walk out, not even once, not even if I heard footsteps, not even if I heard my own name. I did what she told me. I went on my day off. I walked the loop alone. I got to the slope where we had found the sun, and I did the thing Sarah had told me to do. And I walked out, and I did not look back. I heard footsteps behind me for about 20 minutes. They were not my footsteps. They were a little heavier, and they were a little slower, and once, about halfway out, I heard a man clear his throat. He cleared it the way you clear it when you are about to say something, and then decide not to. I did not turn around. I did not run. I walked at the pace Sarah had told me to walk, which was the pace of someone who is not afraid, which is a pace you have to fake very carefully when you are very afraid. I got to my truck. I got in. I drove home. I did not see him at my cabin that night. I did not see him again that season. But I understood now what the rule meant. And I understood why Sarah had asked me to repeat it. And I understood why Ellis had looked at me the way he had on the first day. The rest of the summer, I followed the rule. I did not count. Not in the van, not on the trail, not in my head. When we brought people out, I described them to myself by detail. The woman in the red jacket, the boy with the cast, the older man with the dog. I trained myself out of numbers. It is harder than you would think. Numbers are how we keep track of being alive. You count stairs without meaning to. You count the rings of a phone. You count the people in a room when you walk in, because some old part of your brain wants to know if you are outnumbered. I had to unlearn it. By August I had, mostly. I want to tell you about the thing that happened in September, because it is the reason I left, and it is the reason I am telling you this. And it is the thing I have not told my sister or my therapist or the man I have been seeing for almost a year now. Who knows? I worked in a park one summer, and who knows? I don't want to talk about it, and who has been kind enough not to push it. It was the last week of the season. The air had that quality where you know the first real storm is coming. The tourists had thinned out. The park felt like itself again, which is to say it felt enormous and indifferent and extremely old. We got a call in the late afternoon about a group of backpackers who had missed their check-in by a full day. 4 of them, a permit group, experienced, all in their 30s, all from the same city. They had filed a route that took them through a part of the park I had not been in before, a basin on the north side that did not get a lot of traffic, because the approach was long and the payoff was, according to Cal, just more of what you had already seen to get there. Ellis sent Sarah, Tomas, and me. He sent us with more food and water than we would need for a 3-day trip, and he looked at me when he was loading the packs, and he said, "You remember the rule?" It was not a question. I said yes. He said, "Good, you especially. In that basin, you especially." We hiked in that evening and camped at a lake about 6 miles from the basin. In the morning, we went the rest of the way. The basin was beautiful in a way that made you uncomfortable. It was a bowl of gray rock with a small, very still lake in the middle of it, and the walls of the bowl were streaked with something darker than the rest of the stone, like long drips, and the light down in the bowl was different from the light above it, flatter, older. The way light looks in a photograph taken a long time ago. Tomas found their camp within an hour. It was set up neatly at the north end of the lake. 4 tents, all zipped. A bear canister, properly stored. A fire ring, cold. Packs inside the tents. Boots outside the tents, lined up in pairs. Everything the way you leave it when you go for a day hike and expect to come back. We called out. Nothing answered. We checked the tents one by one, empty all of them, sleeping bags neatly rolled, journals on top of the bags in 2 of them. In one journal, the last entry was from the evening they had arrived. It said, "Basin is strange. G thinks we should hike out tomorrow. Maybe we will. Sleeping now. Lake very still." The handwriting was calm. There was no next entry. Sarah radioed it in. Ellis told us to sweep the basin in a pattern and check in every hour. We spread out. Tomas took the west wall, Sarah took the east. I took the south, which was the direction they would have gone if they had tried to hike out on a different route than the one they came in on. I want to tell you plainly what happened next, because I have spent a lot of time making it complicated in my head, and the truth is simpler than the versions I have invented. I found them, all 4 of them. They were sitting in a row on a long flat rock about a half-mile south of the lake, facing away from me, looking down into a small side valley. They were alive. They were not injured. When I came up behind them and said hello, they turned around slowly, all 4 at once, and they looked at me with the same expression the man in the gray jacket had worn in the van, which was the expression of someone looking at a dog they used to own. I asked if they were okay. They said yes. Their voices were fine, their faces were fine. They stood up and gathered their day packs, and they followed me back toward the lake. And they talked to me on the way. Normal conversation about their jobs and about the hike in and about how they had lost track of time and felt terrible that we had had to come find them. They were warm. They were funny. One of them, a woman named Greta, made a joke about her husband snoring that the other 3 laughed at in a way that suggested they had heard it many times. We got back to their camp. Sarah and Tomas were already there. Sarah looked at the 4 of them and then at me, and her face did something I had not seen it do before, which was nothing. It went completely still. Thomas behind her put one hand on the strap of his pack and kept it there. Sarah said, very calmly, "We're glad you're safe. We're going to pack up camp and start out. It's a long hike back." She did not ask me how many I had found. She did not look at them again after that first look. She moved among the tents with Thomas, taking them down, packing them up, and the 4 backpackers helped, and everyone was pleasant, and the sky was getting lower, and the light in the basin was getting flatter, and I could feel, underneath my sternum, a pressure I have felt exactly twice in my life. Once in that basin. Once years later in a hospital waiting room the night my father died. We hiked out. We made it to the lake where we had camped the first night just before dark. We set up. The 4 backpackers were tired, they said. They went into their tents early. Sarah built a fire, and Thomas sat next to it and did not speak. And Sarah did not speak either for a long time, and I did not ask. Finally, when the fire was low, Sarah looked at me across it and she said very quietly, "How many did you find?" I opened my mouth to say 4. I closed it. I thought about the rule. I thought about the man in the gray jacket. I thought about the expression on their faces when they had turned around on the rock, all 4 of them at once, like a single body with 4 heads. I said, "I found them at the rock. They were sitting in a row." Sarah nodded. She said, "How many were sitting in a row?" I said, "I am not going to count." She closed her eyes. She kept them closed for a long time. When she opened them, they were wet, and she said, "Good, don't, not tonight, not tomorrow, not when we get them to the lodge, not when their families come, not ever." "Do you understand me?" "Not ever." I said I understood. Thomas, across the fire, said something in a language I didn't know. Sarah translated it without being asked. She said, "He says the basin gave us more than we went in with. He says we have to carry it out without looking at it directly. He says if we look at it directly, it will choose." I asked her because I had to. "Choose what?" She said, "Which of us to keep." We hiked out the next day. The 4 backpackers were cheerful. They told stories. They thanked us repeatedly. When we got to the trailhead, their families were waiting. There was a lot of hugging and crying and the kind of relieved laughter that people do when they have been sure for a day that someone they love is dead. I stood to the side and I did not count. I described them to myself by detail. The woman in the green fleece, the man with the glasses, the tall one with the beard, the one whose wife was holding his face in both hands, and a 5th person, standing a little apart with her back to me, talking to no one. A woman in a gray jacket. I did not let my eyes rest on her. I described her to myself only in the smallest way necessary to know she was there. Gray jacket, dark hair, standing apart. I did not count her. I did not add her to the others. I let her be her own thing, unattached to any number. Ellis was at the trailhead. He had driven up himself, which he almost never did. He looked at the group, and then at Sarah, and then at me, and then, very briefly, at the woman in the gray jacket. His face did what Sarah's had done in the basin. It went still. He walked over to me. He said quietly, "You didn't count." I said, "No." He said, "Good, go home. Take a week. Come back when you're ready or don't come back. Either way, I'll sign your paperwork." I didn't come back. I drove out that night. I packed my cabin in an hour, and I drove south, and I didn't stop until I was across 2 state lines. I slept at a motel, and I cried in the shower, because I had not cried at the trailhead, and the crying had been waiting in me like weather. In the morning, I kept driving. I got back to my apartment in the city 4 days later. My sister came over and made me eat. I told her the job hadn't been for me. She said she was sorry. She didn't push. I have not been back to a national park since, not any of them. I cannot explain to the people in my life why I won't go. I have made up a story about an injury that flares up at altitude. It is a small, easy lie, and I have told it enough times that it feels almost true. I have kept the rule. I do not count. Not people, not anything. I don't count the stairs in my building. I don't count the rings of the phone. When I am in a crowded room, I do not do the old animal thing of checking if I am outnumbered, because I have learned that the number you get is not always the number that is there. I describe. I notice. I let each thing be its own thing. It is a small discipline, and it has cost me almost nothing, and it has, I believe, kept me alive. I heard from Sarah once, about 2 years after I left. She sent me a letter, an actual paper letter, to an address I had not given her, which did not surprise me as much as it should have. The letter was short. She said Ellis had retired. She said Tomas had gone back to wherever he was from. She said she was still on the team, and that they'd had a good season, and that she hoped I was well. At the bottom, in smaller writing, she had added a postscript. She wrote, "The woman in the gray jacket came to the lodge last fall. She asked about you by a name you never used at work. I told her you had moved and I didn't know where. I am telling you this so you will be careful. I am not telling you this to frighten you. Be careful anyway." I burned the letter. I don't know why. It felt like the thing to do. Sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I think about the basin. I think about the 4 backpackers on the rock, sitting in a row, facing away. I think about how they turned around all at once. I think about the journals in the tents, the calm handwriting, the sentence that said lake very still. I think about the expression on the face of the man in the gray jacket. And I think about how it was the same expression on the faces of the 4 backpackers. And I wonder if what I carried out of that basin was 4 people or 3 people and something else wearing the 4th, or 2 people and 2 things. And I stop myself because wondering is a kind of counting, and I do not count. I want to tell you one more thing, and then I will stop. A few months ago, I was at a grocery store near my apartment. It was evening and the store was not crowded, and I was in the cereal aisle, which is the most banal place in the world. And I was comparing 2 boxes of the same cereal because one of them was on sale and the other had a coupon, and I heard someone behind me clear their throat. They cleared it the way you clear it when you are about to say something and then decide not to. I did not turn around. I put both boxes in my cart. I walked to the register. I paid. I walked home. I did not look in any reflective surface on the way. I did not look behind me. I made dinner. I went to bed. I slept eventually. In the morning on my kitchen table there was a small black notebook with a rubber band around it. I had not put it there. I had never seen it before. I did not open it. I took it to the park near my apartment, a small city park with a pond and some ducks and a play structure. And I sat on a bench and I held the notebook in my lap for a long time. I did not open it. I got up. I walked to the pond. I dropped the notebook in the water. It sank faster than I expected. I walked home. I did not look back. I heard footsteps behind me for about 20 minutes. They were not my footsteps. I did not turn around. When I got to my building, the footsteps stopped at the door. I went inside. I went up to my apartment. I locked the door behind me. I did not look out the peephole. I have not looked out the peephole since. That was 4 days ago. The footsteps outside my door have not left. They move sometimes. They pace. Sometimes they stop for hours, directly in front of the door. And I can feel the weight of something standing there, patient, the way a deer is patient at the edge of a road. Yesterday someone slid a piece of paper under the door. I have not picked it up. It is lying on my entryway floor, face down. I have been looking at the back of it for almost 30 hours. I think I know what is written on it. I think it is a number. I think it is the number I did not say out loud at the trailhead that day. The number I have refused to say for 4 years. The number the basin has been waiting for me to finally confirm. If I pick up the paper and read it, I think I will belong to the total. If I do not pick it up, I think it will wait. I think it will wait as long as it has to. I think it has already waited longer than I have been alive. So I am telling you this instead. I am telling you because as long as I'm telling you, I am not reading. As long as I am describing, I am not counting. As long as I let each thing be its own thing, the footsteps, the paper, the throat clearing in the cereal aisle, the woman in the gray jacket, standing apart at the trailhead, as long as I do not add them together, I am still here. I'm still the shape of myself. If you ever work a job like the one I worked, and someone hands you a small black notebook with a rubber band around it, read it carefully. Follow the rules, especially the ones that don't make sense. And if you find people in a place that should not have them, and you bring them out, and they are pleasant, and they are warm, and they thank you, and their families come running across the parking lot, to hold their faces in both hands. Be happy for them. Be glad you found them. Describe them to yourself in whatever detail you need. But for the love of whatever you love, whatever is left in you to love after a season in a place like that, do not count them, because the number you get is not always the number that is there. And the extras, I promise you, are very patient. They will wait in the back seat. They will wait at the trailhead. They will wait in the cereal aisle. They will wait in the hall outside your door. They will slide a piece of paper under it with a number written on the other side. And they will wait for as long as it takes for you to pick it up. I am not going to pick it up tonight. I do not know about tomorrow.